I still remember the exact moment my son looked me in the eye and chose her over me. It wasn't loud. There was no shouting, no slammed doors, just a quiet sentence that landed heavier than anything I had ever heard in my life. Either you start treating her like she deserves, or you can leave. I smiled. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I finally understood everything. And that's when I reached for my suitcase. My name is Daniel, and for most of my life, I believed I had done one thing right. I raised my son to be kind. After my wife passed away, it was just the two of us. He was 10 at the time, too young to understand death, but old enough to feel its weight. I still remember how he used to sit beside me on the couch, pretending to watch TV while quietly wiping his tears, when he thought I wasn't looking. Back then, we were all each other had. I worked long hours, took extra shifts, skipped meals sometimes, all so he could have a stable life. I never told him how hard it was. I didn't want him to carry that burden. To him, I was just Dad, the one who always showed up, always fixed things, always knew what to say. And for years, that was enough. We built a quiet, simple life. Sunday breakfasts, late-night talks, celebrating small victories like they were big ones. I watched him grow into a man I was proud of, respectful, patient, and thoughtful. Or at least, that's what I believed, until he met her. Her name was Lila. The first time he introduced us, I remember noticing how confident she was, not in a loud or obvious way, but in how she carried herself. She smiled politely, shook my hand, and spoke with a kind of calm control that made it hard to read her. "She's amazing, Dad," he told me later that night. "You'll love her." And I wanted to. I really did. At first, everything seemed normal. She visited often, helped around the house, asked me about my day. There was nothing outwardly wrong, nothing I could point to and say, "This feels off." But there were moments. Small ones. The kind you notice but dismiss because they don't seem important enough to question, like how she would correct him mid-sentence, gently but firmly, or how he started second-guessing himself over the simplest things, looking at her before answering questions, as if seeking approval. I told myself it was just adjustment. Relationships change people. That's normal. But then he moved out. It happened quickly. One day we were having dinner together, and the next, he was packing boxes into a rented truck. Lila stood by his side the whole time, guiding, organizing, deciding. "You'll come visit, right?" I asked him, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course, Dad," he said with a smile. Nothing's changing. But everything was. The house felt different after he left. Quieter, heavier. I tried to stay busy, filling my days with work and small routines. And for a while, he did visit. We'd sit together like old times, talk about life, laugh about memories, but slowly, those visits became shorter, less frequent, and eventually, conditional. "Lila thinks it's better if we plan ahead before I come over," he told me once. "Plan what?" I asked. "Just, so everything is comfortable." Comfortable. That word stayed with me longer than it should have. Still, I didn't argue. I didn't want to create tension between them. I told myself that this was part of letting go, of allowing him to build his own life, his own family. Then one evening, he invited me over to their place for dinner. I remember standing outside their apartment door, holding a small bag of groceries I had brought along. Old habit. I liked contributing, even if it wasn't necessary. Lila opened the door. "Oh," she said, her smile tight. "You didn't have to bring anything." "It's just a few things," I replied. Thought it might help. She hesitated for a second before stepping aside. Inside, everything was perfect. Too perfect. The furniture was arranged with precision. The kitchen counters were spotless. Even the air felt controlled, like nothing was allowed to exist unless it belonged there. My son greeted me warmly, but there was something different in his eyes. A kind of tension I couldn't quite place. Dinner started pleasantly enough. We talked about work, about the weather, about small things. But gradually, I began to notice how often Lila steered the conversation. If I spoke too long, she would interrupt, politely but decisively. If my son laughed too loudly, she would glance at him, and he'd immediately tone it down. At one point, I got up to help clear the table. "You can leave that," she said quickly. "I have a system." I paused. "I've been washing dishes longer than you've been alive." It was meant to be lighthearted, a joke, but she didn't laugh. Instead, she looked at my son. And that's when I saw it. That silent exchange. That unspoken understanding between them. "Dad," he said gently, "just let her handle it." I sat back down. Something inside me shifted. Just slightly. Not broken, not yet. Just unsettled. As the evening went on, I found myself speaking less, observing more, watching the way my son adjusted himself around her, like he was constantly trying to fit into a version of himself she approved of. And I wondered, when did he stop being the boy who used to speak freely? When did he start asking permission without words? Later that night, as I was about to leave, my son walked me to the door. "Everything okay?" he asked. I looked at him. Really looked at him. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah," I said slowly. "Everything's fine." But it wasn't. And deep down, I think he knew that too. Over the next few weeks, things only grew more distant. Phone calls became shorter. Messages went unanswered. And every time I suggested meeting, there was always a reason it wasn't convenient. Until one day, he showed up at my house unannounced, alone. The moment I saw him standing there, something told me this wasn't a casual visit. There was a weight in his posture, a hesitation in the way he stepped inside. We sat down in the living room, the same place where we used to watch movies together. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he took a deep breath. "Dad, we need to talk." I nodded, keeping my expression calm. He looked down at his hands, then back at me. "Lila feels uncomfortable when she's around you." I felt a quiet sting, but I didn't react. "Uncomfortable?" I repeated. "She thinks you don't respect her boundaries," he continued. "That you try to take control or undermine her in her own home." I leaned back slowly, absorbing his words. "Is that what you think?" I asked. He hesitated. And that hesitation said more than anything else. "It's not about what I think," he said finally. "It's about what we need moving forward." "We," that word again. "Always we, never just him anymore." I nodded, waiting. And then he said it, calmly, clearly, without raising his voice. "My son gave me an ultimatum." He swallowed, then met my eyes. "Either you start treating her the way she expects, or it's better if you don't come around anymore." For a moment, the room felt completely still. No anger, no shouting, just silence. And in that silence, something inside me finally broke into clarity. I smiled. Slowly, quietly, and without saying a word, I stood up and walked toward my bedroom. Because in that moment, I already knew exactly what I was going to do next, and he had no idea what that decision would cost him. I didn't slam the door. I didn't raise my voice. I just walked into my bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled out the old suitcase I hadn't used in years. The zipper made that familiar low sound as I dragged it open. A sound that felt louder than anything said in the living room. Behind me, I could feel him standing there, waiting, confused. "Dad, what are you doing?" he asked. I folded a shirt carefully before placing it inside. "I'm making it easier for you." "For me?" His voice tightened slightly. "That's not what I meant." I paused, looking down at the suitcase for a moment before speaking again. "You said it's better if I don't come around anymore unless I change." "I'm choosing not to change." Silence. Heavy, uncomfortable. "But you don't have to leave," he said, stepping closer. "We're just asking for some respect, some boundaries." I turned to face him then, not angry. Just steady. "Respect isn't something you demand from someone who already gave you everything they had," I said quietly. "And boundaries aren't walls you build around one person while letting another decide how high they go." He looked at me like he didn't recognize me. Maybe he didn't. I zipped the suitcase shut and walked past him into the living room. Every step felt final, but not rushed. I had spent years making decisions for him. This was the first time in a long time I was making one for myself. At the door, I picked up my keys. "Dad," he said again, softer this time. "You're overreacting." That word almost made me smile. Overreacting, after years of silence, after weeks of slow distance, after watching my place in his life shrink into something conditional. I turned the handle and opened the door. "I taught you how to walk," I said without looking back. "I just didn't expect you'd learn how to walk away so well." And then I left. The first few days were quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels peaceful, but the kind that echoes. I stayed at a small rental across town. Nothing special. Just a bed, a table, and a window that looked out onto a street where nobody knew my name. For the first time in years, I didn't have a routine tied to someone else. No waiting for calls, no checking my phone, no adjusting my words to avoid tension. It should have felt lonely, but it didn't. It felt clear. I started noticing things I hadn't paid attention to before. The way mornings felt slower. The way I could sit with my thoughts without rushing to fill the silence. The way my chest didn't feel tight every time his name crossed my mind. I wasn't angry at him. That was the strange part. I was disappointed, not because he chose her, but because he stopped choosing himself somewhere along the way. Weeks passed. Then a month. No calls. No messages. At first, I thought he might reach out. Not to apologize, just to check in. To ask if I was okay. To bridge that quiet space between us. But nothing came. And slowly I stopped expecting it. One afternoon, I was sitting by the window with a cup of tea when my phone finally rang. His name. I stared at it for a few seconds before answering. "Hello? Dad?" His voice sounded different. Not tense. Not controlled. Just tired. "I didn't think you'd pick up," he admitted. "I almost didn't," I replied honestly. A pause. "I wanted to see you," he said. "Can we meet?" I looked out the window, watching a car pass by slowly. "All right," I said. "But not at your place." "Okay," he agreed quickly. "Anywhere you want." We met at a small cafe the next day. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table. For a moment, I just stood there observing him. He looked older. Not physically, but in the way he carried himself. Like something had shifted. When he saw me, he stood up immediately. "Hi," he said. "Hi." We sat down. For a while, neither of us spoke. The noise of the cafe filled the space between us. Cups clinking, quiet conversations. The hum of everyday life continuing as if nothing had changed. But everything had. Finally, he exhaled. "I messed up," he said. Simple. Direct. I didn't respond right away. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he continued. "Trying to keep things balanced. Trying to make her happy. And still keep you in my life." "And what happened?" I asked calmly. He looked down. "I lost both." That landed heavier than I expected. "Lila and I—" He hesitated. "We're not doing well." I nodded slightly, but didn't interrupt. "She said I wasn't setting strong enough boundaries. With you," he went on. "That I was too influenced by you. That if I didn't take control, things would always feel divided." "And you believed her," I said. "I wanted to believe her," he corrected quietly. "That honesty, it mattered. I thought if I just drew a line, everything would settle," he said. But it didn't. The more I gave in, the more there was to give. I leaned back, studying him. "And now?" I asked. He looked at me, and for the first time in a long while, "I saw the boy I raised." "I don't recognize myself anymore," he admitted. Silence stretched between us again. But this time it wasn't heavy. It was honest. "I'm not here to blame her," he added, "or make excuses. I'm here because I miss you, and because I realize I treated you like you were optional." I let those words settle. "I didn't leave because of her," I said finally. "I left because of you." He nodded slowly, as if he had already come to that conclusion. "I know. And I'm not coming back just because you called," I continued. "Things don't reset like that." "I'm not asking for that," he said quickly. I want a chance to fix things, to rebuild. Rebuild. It's a simple word, but it carries weight. "Do you understand what that takes?" I asked. "Yes," he said without hesitation. I held his gaze for a moment, searching for doubt. There was none. Just sincerity, and maybe regret. I reached for my cup, taking a slow sip before setting it back down. "For the first time," I said quietly, "this won't be on my term, or hers." He leaned forward slightly. "It'll be on yours." His brow furrowed. "Mine?" I nodded. "You're going to decide who you are," I said. "Not as someone's husband. Not as someone's son. Just you." He didn't speak. "But understand this," I added. "Whatever you choose, you live with it. Fully. No shifting responsibility. No quiet compromises that eat away at you." He exhaled slowly, as if the weight of that responsibility had just settled on his shoulders. "I understand." I believed him. Not completely, but enough. We sat there a little longer talking about small things. Nothing too deep. Nothing forced, just rebuilding the space between us piece by piece. When we finally stood to leave, he hesitated. "Can I call you?" he asked. I looked at him, then gave a small nod. "You can." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. And as I walked away from that cafe, I realized something I hadn't expected to feel again. Not loss, not anger, but control. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one being asked to choose, and that made all the difference.